Mario Ouwens. I'm working for statistical innovation within AstraZeneca, and I'm working in SIRE group, which is standing for Statistical Innovation for Reimbursement Evidence. So I'm especially interested in health technology assessment for oncology. And I'm working also for INR, for infectious diseases, but also for CVR. Yeah, so for network meta-analysis, we want to actually compare the relevant treatments in the treatment landscape. When you do a randomized clinical trial, some randomized clinical trials are placebo-controlled, some other trials have actually an active treatment, but what you usually see is that only the new treatment is compared with one treatment. So when you actually want to compare your new treatment with a lot of treatments, you need to do something else. So what you need to do is to look at different randomized clinical trials. We see that a comparison for the one which actually is relevant but which is not a new trial is compared in the other randomized clinical trial. And you can look at the combination of the two randomized clinical trials to get an impression of the relative treatment effect for your new treatment versus the treatment of the you are interested in. When you do network meta-analysis, you start with systematic literature review for all the different relevant treatments you have, and you start then to look at what evidence do I have. And today we can think about randomized clinical trials, and we can look at that. We can also look at observational studies to combine that. But what the intention is to actually get a picture of the total treatment landscape, and to see how the new treatment is compared to other treatments in terms, again, for cost effectiveness, in terms of first the efficacy, but second the cost and the quality of adjusted life years. There are a few challenges. I think the first one is when you look at the health technology agencies. So the health technology agencies need to approve the reimbursement dossier you send to them. So what you need is that they agree upon the methodology you actually use for your product. Then you also have the sponsor, the pharmaceutical industry, who is a bit hesitant against the use of new methodology and want to go for safe and want to have a reimbursement dossier which is actually acceptable for health technology agency purposes. And then when you see that, you need to look at how we actually can make the people aware that when you look at, for example, immuno-oncology treatments, that the world is different today from what it was 10 years ago. Although I have to say that my health economics director said you had, in that time, you also had neoadjuvant therapies or surgeries where people actually cured, and we have had it all the time. But it was just not possible before 2010, before we started the work there, to use the extrapolations and to do the network meta-analysis based on that. So what you see historically is that we used methodologies which were based on submissions to regulatory, having the hazard ratio in there. And there we started, so people stay there, even when we are 10 years later. But they stay still on the hazard ratio because that is, they know that it's acceptable. So as long as HCA is not saying no, and they are more and more saying no, then they will stay there. So yeah, we see the different angles like acceptability, guidance. So if HCA agencies would start to make guidance, extended guidance, and they are working on it, so I know that analyses are working on that, then they help the sponsor to be convinced that such a new methodology would be acceptable. And of course we also have the statistical part there. Yes, so what you see is I always think that it's coming out of the wider circle going to the deeper circle. When you start with a hazard ratio, which is not really related to the disease. So I find it very difficult actually to explain to my clinician what the hazard ratio actually is. And also that it is quite easy to get causal problems there. So they start to use the hazard ratio and they start to combine that to actually get to the situation that you apply it to survival extrapolation and getting survival probabilities for other treatments. But when I think about statistics, I want to go back to the drawing table and say, okay, what is my disease? I don't bother about the hazard ratio, I bother about understanding. So what I want to do is making my understanding and then fitting the network meta-analysis to my understanding. So when you think about survival probabilities, I know what a survival probability is. If you say to me that at 1 year you have a survival probability of 50%, I like that. So when you start about that one, you actually start about with log normal distribution, where you make the pattern for the patient. Then when you say, okay, well, if you have the Kaplan-Meiers for the other publications, the Kaplan-Meiers are saying me something. So you really see the percentages going down, and the figure is really illustrative and really important. And that, I know that for regulatory issues it is important to have hazard ratios, but the hazard ratio is not telling me the same information as what I get from the Kaplan-Meiers. So I would like to have the Kaplan-Meiers coming out, and then be able to actually have the freedom to fit distributions, to understand things about cure, to understand things about mixed distributions, mixed cubes, and to see that we get understanding. And it might even be that we get the understanding that some treatments are working in this population, but others are working in that population, and that we really need to separate their populations. We made freedom. So we generated the possibility to actually do a lot of different models related to mixture cure, related to fractional polynomials. Well, freedom is not always good. What I learned when I had children, teenagers, etc., was that we need to have freedom in a guided way. So what we also made was a decision flow diagram, where we said, okay, what decisions make you choose for a certain type of distribution? When would you go for mixture cure? And then you can go to your clinician and say, what do you actually expect for this treatment? Do you expect an onset of treatment? Do you expect a treatment, etc.? So when you go through that flow diagram, you actually end up with a certain type of family of distributions. And that can be used as a guidance for the selection of distributions. And it is not prescriptive, so maybe the health technology agents could actually look at it and could say, okay, well, this is maybe the way to go. And we really say, okay, you have freedom, but you need to do the different clinical questions. And when you have to answer the clinical questions, you actually come up with this distribution family. So we use that distribution family, and we go forward with that together with you. And that is one part. Of course, we need also to have academia there, because academia need to improve that we have indeed had the whole set of families of distributions. And then we need also to have the sponsors convinced that the agencies are open to actually use this type of distributions. Because otherwise we are talking about freedom, but we don't have freedom because there is no acceptability at the end of the reimbursement dossier. And although we want to have freedom, we also have an aim in mind, and that is that the patient will get the treatment which is appropriate for him, and that we go to the hospital knowing that when we would be treated for this cancer, we are treated with a treatment which is evaluated in the right appropriate way. And that's not because we choose the hazard ratio, which is an outcome for regulatory purposes, which they may explain to me what actually means. And that is because we actually do our work consciously, and we select the appropriate method there, and we go for the appropriate method, and we know that we are conscious, and we know that we evaluated the treatment to the best of our knowledge, and so that we can safely go to the hospital, knowing that we are ill, but also knowing that we have had the best treatment which is possible, given the course, of course, of the treatment itself.